Right. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time today to attend this webinar. As Julie said, this is probably a high-level presentation of what's going to be in our 2016 2.0 release. The main focus of this release is going to be around quantity takeoff, but there are some additional pieces of functionality that I do want to highlight. I think it's important to note, though, that this is not an exhaustive list of all the pieces of functionality that are in this version. We only have an hour, and I think it would take quite a bit longer than an hour to go through every kind of bell and whistle that we've added. But I did want to touch the major pieces. So again, thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it today, and let's get started. So what I've got, if you can see my screen, one note is there may be a bit of a delay in GoToWebinar. So I apologize if my speaking gets a little bit ahead of what you see on the screen. I'll try to rein it in as much as possible, but it may get a little bit ahead of where we're at. So I basically just opened up an estimate just so we can have some content to talk to. You can see it's not a very big estimate. It just has a handful of line items. But I wanted to use this to highlight, first and foremost, the new integration with Quantity Takeoff inside of DESTINI Estimator. So unlike other platforms, the Quantity Takeoff is fully integrated inside of DESTINI Estimator. So you'll see that we are not launching other applications. You're not having to take data from one piece of software, move it into another, or use Excel. Nothing like that. I think that's one of the big pieces that makes this really valuable. So new to this version, we've got a new takeoff view that I'll just click on here. Right now I don't have anything open, but this view is where you interact with your quantity takeoff documents. In DESTINI Estimator, we see every document or everything 2D or 3D as a document for quantity takeoff. It's our belief that you're not going to get 100% of your quantities from any one format. You likely won't get 100% from 2D and 3D combined. Oftentimes you'll have to use kind of your own intuition or kind of fill in the gaps where things weren't drawn or specified. So we like to provide the ability to combine an unlimited number of 2D documents and an unlimited number of 3D documents in the same estimate, which is what you can do here. So in this particular estimate that I have, you see a handful of costs to the left. You can see in our filter tree here, we've got some basic costs already applied. And that comes from a bit of a 2D document that I've already started. So I wanted to open that up. Before I open that up, I wanted to highlight one feature that we do have. So anytime you've already associated some 2D or 3D documents with your estimate, you'll have access to those documents here already, so you won't have to go and navigate to them again. If they're a 2D document, they will be embedded inside of the estimate, which is really handy. So if you wanted to email somebody your estimate, you can send them the estimate, and the 2D documents are already there, so they won't have to lose the link between the 2D document and your estimate. So here what I've done is I've just opened a PDF. We do support multiple page PDFs. We even support bookmarks within those PDFs. So that would show, if this PDF had bookmarks, that would show up here in the little bookmarks tab. So here you can see I've got a basic PDF floor plan, and I have done some takeoff already. So what I wanted to do is highlight sort of the interaction between quantity takeoff inside of Estimator and the costing itself. So we do have the same, area calculations, line calculations. First and foremost, you can see that I have some quantity takeoff already done here in my takeoff view. When you add any costs or quantity takeoff, whether that be 2D or 3D, the filter view, which is this view to the left, will filter on both of those things, so both costs and your 2D and 3D quantity takeoff. And this is really handy because when I sketched these different lines and areas, all I told it was its draw style. So how does it, but I didn't tell it anything about traditional estimating information like CSI, breakdown structures, or unit format, or phasing, or departments, or anything like that. But the second I associated costs with these 2D objects, they knew about that. And I'll show you how I did that in a second. But before I get into how I do that, I want to show you kind of what that provides you. So because there are some costs tied to these 2D takeoff objects, if I click on any one of these pieces, so let's say finishes, for example, it will filter out everything in my takeoff, and simultaneously, I'm going to switch over to my estimate view. It'll filter in my estimate view as well, all things that do not, or that only apply to finishes. So you can see here that we've got some carpet applied to this, and that some of the line items inside of this carpet takeoff are in finishes. And so this carpet takeoff knows that it also is applied to finishes. So I wanted to pick on thermal and moisture protection. You can see that here for my slab. We have some masonry. I've got concrete, which is also slab, and site construction, which is also slab. But one of the really neat things is that these are the pieces that have had costing associated with them. But what if I wanted to see the things that didn't have any costing associated with them? Well, I can click on this unknown folder here, and now it'll instantly filter all the things that have costing associated with them out, leaving only those things that don't have costing associated. So now I'm just going to window select just so you can see, so I'll highlight some of the components here inside of this 2D takeoff window. So you can see there's a handful of partitions, 1-hour walls, even some area takeoffs. None of these have any costing associated with them. So let me do two things. One, I want to show you what it looks like if I had an existing 2D takeoff object and I wanted to associate cost with them. So first what I'll do is I will select maybe just a handful of these walls, and then I'm going to associate I'll just kind of pen select here, and I'll associate a cost with these 1-hour walls that I've selected. So the way I do that is I select these walls, and just like adding any other cost, I can come to the estimate. In this case, maybe I'll add an assembly. I can either navigate to the walls that I want to add, or I can click on my find here and just say I want to add a 1-hour. I'll search for 1 hour and add 1-hour wall. So this will bring up my assembly takeoff view. And in my assembly takeoff view, just like you've seen in previous versions of Estimator, it's going to show you your image that you have associated with your assemblies that you can use for helping maybe junior estimators or estimators who are not familiar with this particular assembly answer some of the questions that it might be prompting you with. It'll also show you, if you're tying it to 2D or 3D quantity takeoff, the objects in your 2D or 3D quantity takeoff that you've got selected. So you can see a nice little visual here of these are the objects that I'm about to tie to my 1-hour wall. So what you can do is you can see, based off of what I've selected, the properties that are applicable to all of the things that I have selected. If I've selected multiple different types of objects, either maybe a couple of lines and a couple of areas, it would filter out those properties that only applied from one or another. So this will only show the properties that are combined. In this case, my assembly is asking for length of wall and height of wall. In this case, what I'll do is I have this length parametric for the walls that I've selected, and that's the combined length of all the walls. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to drag that over. As I drag that, you can see that the fields that where I can drop this start to highlight, just to give me some visual indicator on where I can and cannot place this mapping. So I'm going to place that on the wall length. So now this assembly is now getting its length of wall from the combined length of walls of the items that I've selected. Just like in the previous version of Estimator, I can still come in and manually change any one of these values. So if there were any particular quantities that I wanted to round up or down or change the unit price, for example, I can do that here on the fly. I can even back into the total cost by changing this value. And if I backed into the total cost, what that would do is it would actually change the unit price for each of the line items in this assembly based on their contribution to that assembly. But I'm going to leave them as is. And said OK. So now we have actually associated an assembly takeoff and its associated line items with those walls that I've selected. All right, so now I'm going to go back to my takeoff view. And one of the things you'll notice is that those walls have disappeared from my 2D takeoff window. And the reason why they've done that is because I'm still telling it to filter all of the things that do not have costs. This same concept works very well for 3D, which I'll show in just a second. But it's a good way if you had your takeoff done already and you weren't actively applying cost as you did your takeoff, to perform your takeoff and then come back later and start to associate those things with your costing and have them disappear so you can very easily see what's left to be priced. So if I click on Finishes now, not only does that rolled carpet show up that we looked at earlier, but also so do the walls that I just highlighted and associated those costs with. One other thing that's very interesting, if I click on, say, one of these walls, I can right-click and look at the properties of that wall. So here you can see the basic properties of any one of the takeoff objects that you've created. Now, we support an unlimited number of properties that you can associate with any takeoff object, 2D or 3D. So if you want to add any of your own additional pieces of information, things like department or phase, start and stop time for construction, you can. Or just additional variables that you might use when tying to your costing that you can come back now and change at a later point to do some what-if scenarios. So, for example, in the case of carpet, if I wanted to change the quality of carpet, I might have a variable that says carpet level. And then one of the things that we can do is instantly filter on all carpet objects in my estimate, select carpet level, change it from, say, 3 to 4, and watch that effectively retake off the estimate or line items that are associated with that 2D takeoff object. While we're here, on top of the properties and basic drawing information for this wall, I can also see the associated costs. So now I can see the assemblies that are directly tied to the wall I've selected, or the line items within those assemblies that are tied to that wall. One of the things I can also do is see immediate changes to the pricing as I update any of these takeoffs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to drag my estimate window. We're a bit limited on real estate, but I'm going to drag my estimate window over so that I can have both the takeoff and the estimate visible at the same time. All right, so now you can see that I've got my estimate view at the bottom and my takeoff view at the top. And what I'll do is I will select, say, one of these walls. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can get a little closer look. Right now, the quantity for the length of the wall is 15,500 square feet. So if I were to take one of these walls, I'll just select this guy, and I just want to take it and I want to drag this wall out. As soon as I drop it, you can see that my assembly now re-quantified itself based off of the mappings that I specified earlier. So that doesn't actually fit my drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit undo to undo that change. That will undo both the change and the updates. It'll re-update my quantities. But what I wanted to highlight here is there's two big pieces, two big benefits that you have to this tight coupling. One, you not only get to see specifically the cost associated with any one of your 2D or 3D quantity takeoff objects, which makes it very easy to QA/QC your estimates, to do some sort of tracking on who did what and where the quantities have come from. But it also allows you to gain access to all the information bidirectionally. So now the line items know about the information from the components they're tied to, and the components know information about the line items that are tied to them. So now I can do very fast filtering like you saw earlier. Also, one of the really neat things about this filter view is not only can we filter it based off of information on costing, we can filter it based off information about the model. So maybe I want to add the component name. This is a property that will be new in 2016.2.0. This didn't exist before. This is new with the addition of our quantity takeoff. So maybe what I'll do is I'll say, first I want to organize my filter view based off the component name. And then instead of CSI level 1 and 2, let's take that out and let's organize based off of master format level 1 and 2. Now, for those of you who have been using our software, you know that this is configurable. So, and you can configure it in any way you like, and you can save these configurations. So in this particular case, now my filter view is broken down by component name. So now I can say, show me all the 1 hour walls. Now this is irrespective of cost being tied to them because I filtered on the component name first. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize my costing just for a second, just so you can get some real estate. You can see the 2D takeoff filter. All right, so we have my 1 hour walls, 2 hour walls, carpet level 3, the office partitions, which are a bit hard to see, but they're here, and then of course slab on grade and tilt wall. So you can start to filter your quantity that way. Now, simultaneously while I'm filtering that quantity takeoff, I'm also filtering my estimate. So I'm going to bring that estimate view back and start to filter on the associated costs with each one of these quantity takeoff objects. All right, so I haven't created any quantity takeoff objects yet. So far, I've just been filtering and associating costs. So what I'd like to do is just show you what it looks and feels like to sketch something inside of our 2D takeoff object. It's extremely similar to anything you've probably done before if you're familiar with 2D quantity takeoff. Here, I'm just going to invoke an area. Matter of fact, I can pick from standard area, line, or count takeoff objects, or we have a very handy feature, which is our takeoff palette. This allows you to save pre-configured takeoffs. Not only does it save the draw styles themselves and the name of the component or the takeoff object, but it also saves any custom properties that you may have added. And this is extremely handy, not only for standardization within your teams, because you can actually set this as a team or company standard if you'd like, but it also enables you to have all the properties there that you would typically use to map to your costing. So, for example, if I wanted to select stone tile, it'll automatically take me into sketching. So I accidentally clicked on here, so I'm going to hit undo, and now I'm going to sketch, say, stone tile for this room. So very standard sketching, just like what you're used to. One of the things that just happened, it kind of blacked out for a second, but I think it's a handy thing to point out, is stone tile has now showed up in my filter view. And so because initially I was filtering on tilt wall, it disappeared until I went over here and I clicked on stone tile, which has now appeared because I've added stone tile for the first time to my estimate. Now that we're here, I can select on my stone tile, and like other applications, if I hover over the outside edge, you'll see on your screen that there's a little bit of a green indicator with a plus symbol. This allows me to add points just by middle mouse clicking, and then of course I can click and drag these points. So you have the ability to, after the fact, modify any of your shapes. There's a whole bunch of really neat features around kind of double-clicking your feature, which will allow you to kind of move it anywhere you'd like. So a lot of small things like that we've added that I don't have time to show all of today. I'm going to hit undo just to get my shape back to where it was, so we have something that kind of resembles the room I sketched over. So now we have the shape. I can add cost the way you've seen before. It doesn't require you to sketch the shape first and add cost. A lot of you on the phone today often use a template estimate. So you'll have cost already defined in a standard layout and a standard set of assemblies and line items that represent whatever building type that you're currently estimating. So if I had cost already defined, you could easily map those to any takeoff object. The only thing that matters is you select the takeoff object you want to map it to. You go over to your estimate. You pick the cost that you want to map. So in this case, I'm gonna show everything, so I can select my takeoff object, come over here, pick my cost. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, let's say add, I don't have any really good items here, but let's just hypothetically say that I was going to put some jib board on this area for the perimeter. I could do that, and all you do is hit this, hit update takeoff item. Based off what you have selected, it'll show up in that line item takeoff. It'll give you all the properties available for the things you've got selected, and then you can map it accordingly. So this will look and feel exactly as it did before when I pulled something straight from our database, our costing database, except for now I'm just tying it to an existing line item inside of my estimate. All right, at an extremely high level, that would be the integrated 2D quantity takeoff. You have, just to recap, the ability to create your standard takeoff objects You have access to a library that can be quickly filtered using this filter command here. So maybe I want to say wall, show me all the walls, and it'll filter your palette or your takeoff palette accordingly. And then you can draw those, associate costs with them, and then that tight coupling allows you to modify your 2D quantity takeoff, see that result of the modification in real time, and allow your costing to access all the properties that 2D quantity takeoff object knows about. One thing I didn't get into with the quantity takeoff is setting scale, but you do have to set scale in order to quantity takeoff, and you do that through our set scale command here. So it would walk you through that, but the basic gist of it is every time you open up a new PDF or image, it would automatically run the set scale command for you. You'd click on 2 points and give it the dimension. We will be enhancing this in the future to allow you to set scale very rapidly for multiple documents and picking from multiple standard scale types. All right, I'm going to move over to the 3D quantity takeoff.
I'm going to ask a question since it came in
sure.
Before you jump over to 3D. The question is, instead of dragging existing lines, can you add new lines and they will be linked to the selected assembly?
So if I were to add, yes, so it won't happen automatically though, but if I were to sketch a new line, so I click line, I sketch the line, I could then, in the exact way we showed before, select those objects and hit update takeoff, and it would add that line along with all the previous lines to that assembly. In our 3.0 version, which will be coming out soon, this is going to get even faster and easier, and it will happen automatically. And I look forward to maybe in a future webinar giving you guys a little bit more of an insight into what that looks like. All right, so moving over to 3D. Just like with 2D, I'm going to open a document. So it doesn't matter that it was 2D or 3D. In this case, maybe what I'll do is open a simple document here. So this is going to be a Navisworks model. Our integration with 3D quantity takeoff does work with Navisworks. But one of the key pieces that I want to highlight is this is not Navisworks QTO. This is not the QTO integrated with Navisworks. This doesn't use any of that functionality whatsoever. This is quantity takeoff for 3D built specifically for estimators, and it's done entirely through our application. We use Navisworks as a viewer, and we use the Navisworks API to get a hold of the model data. Personal opinion, the best models usually come through Revit, but we have done a number of QTO integrations with IFC from Tekla and Navisworks native files. We import primarily NWD. That's our preferred file format. NWC can work, but it has, for those of you who know Navisworks out there, it's not all in one file, and so it does present some issues potentially for the estimator if there are changes in the future. All right, so now that I've opened this document, you can see this is a Navisworks viewer. So we are interacting with a 3D model here. Just like you saw in 2D, I can select any one of these objects and associate costing in the exact same way. And this is important because it doesn't require any of your estimators to have to learn something new. You don't have to learn a new thing on how to get quantities from a 3D model. It's going to look and feel and behave the same way it did for 2D. It just happens to be a 3D model as the document. So just like we did before, I can organize my filter tree based off of CSI or model component. Or now that I've opened up this model, I have access to the properties of that model. So you'll see a number of new pieces of information that are available here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to organize this based off of layer, and then I want to organize it based off of maybe the Revit family element type. I'm going to add these two pieces in. We can keep this costing, even though right now there are no costing applied to this model. Maybe I'm going to leave in master format level 1. So we'll have it layer, then family, then master format level 1. So right now, you can see that my filter view is now broken down by the layers in the model. The way that this workflow would work is that the models are broken down by information that typically the author would organize off of. So Revit, family element, and layer would be traditional properties that you might look at when trying to break down the content in this model. For example, let me see everything in level 1. so it'll filter everything in level 1. And if I wanted to see the roof, I can see the roof, or the walls, floors, doors, or the curtain wall panels. But this is 100% customizable. You do have access to every piece of data inside of your 3D model. We have a very unique whitelisting capability that enables you to define what we call a whitelist, which is basically just a list of properties that you care about. So that would be maybe quantity information like area, counts, perimeter, that kind of thing, or specifically, like you're saying here, information you might use to kind of cut, slice, and dice your models so that you can get to the information you need as quickly as possible. And we call it a whitelist because we only include the properties that you want. We don't include all the other minutia. Especially with Navisworks models or Revit models, there could be a lot of additional pieces of information that the estimator just doesn't care about, and it makes it very confusing if you have to go through 100,000 different property values to try to find the one piece of information you're looking for. This is traditionally where other applications fall apart, is just kind of overwhelming the estimator with all this useless information, and it makes it very confusing to figure out what's the real quantity. This is one of those times when I really want to emphasize the need for just the pre-construction team to be part of the BIM execution plan in general, so that you have something agreed upon going forward to make it a lot easier for the authors of the model or the estimators to understand and traverse these models. In this case, though, there's no kind of BEP with pre-con done. This is just how the author organizes the model, and you can see it's really pretty simple. Now that I've organized this by level and family element, what I want to do here is just select. I can do the select all by hitting Control A, or I can come through and select whatever ones I like to associate costs. So I'm going to hit Control A. I'm going to associate costs with every one of my curtain wall panels, just like you saw with 2D. I'm going to associate an assembly here. So I'm going to do curtain wall. It'll bring up the assembly takeoff for my curtain wall. This may be a bit hard to see inside of the go-to, but it's got the viewer here with the selected curtain wall panels. Just like with 2D, I can drag the properties, in this case area, over to my area question or variable inside of my assembly for curtain wall. I can answer any of the other questions. So as I go through here, it'll be prompting me with various different options or various different questions that I might need to answer. So in this case, curtain wall option gives me 1 for specialty, 2 for high, 3 for standard. This is all 100% customizable, and this particular database does come with. Now I'm just going to map the area. So now I've associated the area of that curtain wall to that assembly. And just like in 3D, that cost, or just like in 2D, that cost object is now tied directly to the model component, and the model component can ask that cost object for any information. So if I were to now expand system panel, it now knows about all of the, in this case, master format 2004 values associated with it. So what I can do is I can come back, go to a predefined grouping, and if I come here and I want to look at, say, doors and windows, it'll instantly filter the model based off of doors and windows, because in 16 division CSI, that's where these would fall. I didn't have to tell this model about anything other than just associate the cost. So here's just another value of that tight coupling. And like before, if I wanted to click on unknown, it's going to show me every part of this 3D model that has not yet been quantified. You're not going to always, and you know this, you're not going to always get 100% of your quantities from 3D models. So it's our belief that you're going to take what you can from any one of these models. And the idea here is I might just want to do curtain wall takeoff from the 3D model, but I might not trust some of the other pieces in this model for giving me accurate quantities. So I may take those from the 2D documents. And anything else, I'm going to supplement with my own knowledge. Now, when you've got 2D and 3D documents, one of the things that will happen certainly is that you'll get new versions of your building. And so or new versions of the drawings. And so if there has been scope changes or if the design's been further defined, and you do get a new 2D or 3D document, we do handle the ability to compare both 2D and 3D live in the application. So in this case, I'm going to go through what it looks like when you get a new 3D document. So here I've been handed a new 3D document. If Estimator can detect that this is the exact same model through unique identifier information for the project inside of the 3D model, it will let you know. So here it is determined it's the same model. Sometimes you might get a completely new set of information, or the name of the file or documents have changed, or unique identifiers for the model itself might have changed, and Estimator may not be able to pick that up. We still allow you to bring in and compare 3D models, even though that unique identifier is not there. It just won't automatically show you this. What it will do is you'll have to come over here and click this Update File button and say, hey, I want to up this document, this 3D document, with a new version of the 3D document, and it will take you to the same path. What this window is prompting me is you get two options. You can either update your estimate, which means basically I've got new quantities, I've got new things in my 3D model, and I want them to affect my estimate, or I can break all existing model associations with this 3D model, and I'm going to bring in a new 3D model and basically retake off the objects in that 3D model. So by default, we want to update the estimate, because this is what you're going to do 9 times out of 10. And it also has a little checkbox here that says, hey, do you want to save a version of this estimate? This is extremely handy because for any of you who have seen our comparison functionality, what this is going to do is it's going to instantly save a version of your estimate tied to the existing 2D or 3D quantity takeoff. Then it's going to bring in the 3D quantity takeoff. I'm just going to hit OK, and allow you to bring back in those old versions and compare them in the comparison view and subsequently your dashboards with your ongoing estimate. So as your estimate progresses and you get from 20 to 50 to 60% drawings, you'll be able to see that progression in your comparison view and in your dashboards, and this just facilitates that. In this case, I'm not going to save it, but if I were to save it, this is basically where you would put it. So now it's going to bring in the new version of the model, but before it affects my estimate, it's going to bring me into a review mode. And so in this mode, it's going to allow me to see those things that have been added, modified, or removed from one version of the model to the other. There's a couple different ways you can look at this. I can look at it as you're seeing it here, where I'm seeing just the components that have been affected. In this case, if you look at the top, what's been modified. If I wanted to see what's been removed, I'd click Removed. If I wanted to see what's been added, I'd click Added. And now you can see all those components that have been added from the old version to the new. So this is one way you can look at this. Just like before, you have the ability to filter your models based off of information in the model or in your estimate. But one additional piece is this is only going to show you those values that were affected. So now if I've got, so let's just say that this had multiple levels and only level 1 was affected. You would only see level 1 here in this filter tree. You wouldn't see all the additional information. And this makes it very, very handy to go through and quickly find the pieces that have been modified. In this case, our system panels have changed. So what I wanted to highlight is not only can I filter the model, but I can also see the associated costs down below that have been affected as a result of this change. And I get to, before it affects my estimate, go through and okay each one of these changes. And so I can either take the update, or I can say I want to unhook that because I want to keep my previous quantities and I don't want the new quantities to affect my estimate. We even use that same innovative color coding standard that we have in our comparison view here to color code the variance, so that as you have very large estimates with many line items and very large models, it becomes very easy to see the ones that were affected, and in a big way. So one of the things I was mentioning before is you can see just those model components that were affected, or I can show the entire model, and I can ghost out those parts of the models that were not affected, and then highlight in one particular color, which is customizable, those pieces that were. And so now everything in blue is a component that's been modified. So you do have a number of different ways that you can look at what's been modified, added, modified, or removed, either with showing the entire model and then ghosting the parts unaffected, or only showing those parts of the model that have been affected. and you have the ability to determine exactly how this is going to affect your estimate before it affects your estimate. So once I've gotten comfortable with the effect this new model is going to have, the new quantities are going to have on my estimate, I can hit OK, and now I have effectively updated that 3D document and the quantities associated with it with my estimate. And here's the new version of the model. All right. The only other thing that I wanted to highlight, really I guess just show you, is just like in 2D, where you have your list of associated documents, you now have your list of 3D documents associated as well. It is important to note, though, that the 3D models are not stored within the estimate itself, and that's only because of the weight of the models. A lot of these models can get very large, and we didn't want your estimate files to be large as well. You do have the ability inside of these 3D models to change property information. So if I wanted to, I can change the property information of any one of these objects. I can literally modify what's in the estimate or what's in the model to make sense for my estimate. Oftentimes these might be modeled using the wrong components or using a different nomenclature. And so if I wanted to come through, select all my system panels, for example, and make a change on their properties, I could change these values just by typing into the component information here for whatever I have selected. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left, and I haven't gotten to any of the other pieces of information that I wanted to highlight. So what I'm going to do is I want to bring my estimate view up. And I will just let this take over the whole screen.
So we have a couple of questions. Well,
for the 3D?
3D, and there was one that came in at the end of the 2D.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So the one that came at the end of the 2D, will you be able to set multiple scales on one sheet?
No, no. So for each sheet, only one scale can be set. I'm assuming that's probably for if you have a cut. So we do have some ideas around that. We will be integrating with also other 2D takeoff applications that will be embedded just like this. So we will see functionality like that in the future. Get another one?
Do you want to go through this first? I can go through it.
Either way, dealer's choice.
I'll ask one more.
Right.
So this is during the 3D part. Can you pre-map estimate light items to the takeoff items in your palette?
Great question. So that is coming. That is not in this version. That will be in the next version. So that's what I was alluding to earlier, the 2D. That will be coming, the ability to pre-map costs to both 2D and 3D so that you can very, very rapidly get a cost estimate simply by sketching or by pointing at sections of the model and saying apply auto costing. So that's coming, so stay tuned.
So the other part from that same person is, what are the printing features? Is there an option to add a color legend to identify what colors match specific materials?
So the printing, there is. We basically incorporate all of the takeoff information inside of our reporting data set. What that is, that's basically techie for you have access to all of your quantity information and draw file information, and you can generate reports from there. I don't think I have one already created, but you could do that, yeah.
And so I'm going to take this time to say if the audience does have more questions, please go ahead and send those in. And I still have more and more questions coming in, so I'll hold off on those until after you show this part.
All right, there are two other big pieces that I wanted to highlight. One was what we call our highlight rules. This is located in our estimate ribbon here. This is the ability to create any number of rules to highlight rows, any particular color based off of whatever logic you'd like. So for example, you might use this for is show me in, say, orange. All right, let's go a little bit brighter orange. Show me in an orange all of my cost items that are mapped. So I've given it some name for the rule, which is mapped items, and I'm going to add a rule. I'm going to say I need the isMapped property to be true. And so now it's going to highlight those rows in orange that have been mapped. Now in this case, my entire estimate has been mapped to 2D or 3D. This is very handy because if you've got a number of different documents and there are different types like 2D and 3D, it's very nice to be able to see if you had a template estimate, for example, what has yet been associated with a quantity takeoff object. You might also want to add a highlight rule, so let's bring back our highlight rule. And we'll add a new highlight rule that says, show me all my zero quantity items. So we'll say zero quantity. And then we're going to highlight that maybe in red. So we're going to say the quantity is equal to 0. Now, one thing to note is none of the rows highlighted in red, and the reason why is because the order of these rules means something. So in this case, if I want the quantity to take precedent over the mapping, I need to move it up, which is what I've just done. So now you can see the rows that have zero quantity are highlighted in red. And there's no limit to the amount of rules or mappings, or sorry, highlight rules that you can create. And there's no limit to the amount of logic that you can add. So you can have a series of rules that say, show me, everything in sight that's got a quantity over 100, but a unit cost of, 0 for, some particular cost item. So labor cost was 0. So you can get that detailed in this. The other big piece that I wanted to highlight before we run out of time is we have two new fees, or two new, constructs instead of our fees. So one is this ability to distribute a fee. In the past, in previous versions of Estimator, you had to apply your fee either to a subtotal, to the direct costs, or to one of the percentage of labor into the cost categories that we have had. Now what you can do is you can specify any amount of logic you'd like, or some kind of logic to say, I only want to spread this fee or apply this fee to very particular line items. So if I wanted to create a new fee, and I'm just going to say, percent of A, or A10, let's say, I can say that it's going to be a percent of direct, but it's going to be distributed to those items for A10. So like you saw before in that rules editor, I can come through now and say I want to add a new thing that must be true, basically. So the line item classification level 1 must equal, and it's going to populate with all the values, or actually we'll say 2 since we said A10. Foundations. And so now it's going to distribute this over the foundations. Now what it's telling me is that I don't have anything that meets this criteria, so I didn't add anything to A. So maybe a better fee would be maybe percent of 03. So, and then we'll make this, instead of A, we'll add the CSI level 1 of the line item equals 03. So you have the ability to distribute your cost. Now I haven't given it a fee, so let's say it's going to be 5% of my direct is going to be distributed over the concrete. And so now I've specifically defined where I'm going to give this fee to. So now I can really control exactly where my fees are applied. So if you need to make something go up or down based off of the total cost, direct cost, or percentages of labor or material for any particular category, you can. The other fee type that we've created, aside from distributed fees, is the ability to create any number of bond fees. So we have an embedded bond calculator. So the way you do that is you would click on this fee type, you'd select bond, then when you click on amount, a little calculator is displayed. This allows you to bring up our bond fee editor. So this allows you to create any logic you need to on your bonds. And for those of you who've gone through this before, bonds operate on a stepped method. So in this case, I might say, I'm going to add a step here, and the first, say, 100,000 is going to have maybe a 2% bond. And it will calculate that for you based off of the total cost because it's applying it to the direct cost. And then I say I want to add another one, but the next, say, 2 million is going to have, a 1% fee. And what it will do is you can create as many steps as you'd like, and it will calculate those values for you and display that calculation here. Now, obviously, my entire direct cost was only 1.6 million, so it's only going to apply that piece that is above 100,000 but less than 200 or 2 million here, and so that only equaled $15,000 in fee. We even have a nice little section here for bond premiums that you can expand by clicking this arrow. So if you have things where you have premiums that are applied based off of construction duration or just additional premiums depending on where you're working, you can specify those values here. So if the current duration was going to be 12 months, or let's just say 24 months, and the duration threshold, so this is when the new premium be applied, was at 12, and I said it's going to be a 1% fee, or 1% additional premium on top of my bond for each month, then I'm going to have an additional premium of $2,000. So it gives you a nice little subtotal here. It tells you the amount that it's going to increase by. And then if you want, you can even add a surcharge on top of that. So we can add another 2% here as a premium surcharge, which would be $385, which gives our total bond cost of $19,637. So you've got this really handy bond fee editor here that will now update, just like the rest of your indirects, as your estimate progresses. All right, we are 8 minutes away. Hopefully that gives us enough time for questions. At a super high level, those are the big pieces that have been added to 2016 2.0.
Great, thanks, Michael. I do want to say, as your questions are coming in, if we don't get them to them today, I will send out the questions and the answers with the recording after this is over, so that we will answer all of those, even if we can't get to them today during the actual recording of the webinar. Let's see, the next question we have is, how do you handle waste? Can you apply a formula to each item takeoff for waste as needed?
So you can. There's a number of different ways that you can handle waste. Oftentimes people will incorporate that calculation into the formulas, the quantity formulas they use in their line items and assemblies. So they can account for that, and then that can be automatically applied once they do their quantity takeoff. This makes it very nice for your estimators to track and understand, but doesn't expose that waste value to the client in any way. You can also use escalation. So I can select items and specifically escalate or de-escalate values. So I might want to say that the material cost has a 20% escalation for waste, and apply that as well. And then of course you have crews and crew rates if you do self-perform work and you want to work that in as a additional resource on your material or labor, you can do that too.
Can you create viewpoints similar to Navisworks with visual notes?
So you cannot. In this version, we do not have the ability to specify viewpoints inside of Navisworks with 2D or 3D models, but I will say that is most definitely coming.
With 2D takeoff, are you able to do auto count?
You are, yeah, and I didn't get into the count object. Hold on. I think what they're asking is can I use something like an OCR to automatically recognize shapes inside of the 2D drawing and then count them for me? That is not in this version as well. It will not count that.
Is Estimator 2.0 integrated with the RS Means database? And is the data available at the detailed level to include productivity rates, crew, labor, material, and equipment?
So it is integrated. You do have access to RS Means. We do sell it as just another database that we provide. 1.0 and 2.0 have it. In 2.0, it does not have the crew rates embedded in it, at least not yet. we are working towards that, though.
Can you update the estimate automatically when you get new 2D drawings, much like the way it was demonstrated in 3D?
Yeah, so the way that we handle 2D is it's kind of like a slip sheet where you specify the new drawing. So what you'll do is in the takeoff, you'll go, you would click that update file. In this case, this would be a 2D drawing. You'd find the new version of that particular drawing that you wanted to update, and it would slip it underneath. So the quantity takeoff objects would stay in place. The new drawing would be slipped underneath, and you'd be able to handle the adjustments accordingly. The really cool thing is because it is tightly integrated with the cost, if you do need to stretch and grow your takeoff objects, you don't need to now go back and re-quantify the associated costs accordingly. So it would save you a significant amount of time.
And I believe this question was during the 3D part. If you highlight, is this printable?
Can you print the highlighted sections? I'm assuming like if I select something and I wanted to say click this and then say print.
I'm not quite sure the details of that.
Gotcha. That's fair enough. I believe that's what what they're asking. So when I hit print from here, unless you do, of course, a print screen would do it, but there is no print functionality that is other than print screen that's going to print out this 3D model with highlighted sections and annotations.
Okay. Looks like we have 2 more questions. So can you touch on how to tie the data? Let's see. Can you touch on how to how the database will be updated?
So the only updates for our database and data manager are around just bug fixes and speed improvements. So there aren't any additional changes to our database from 16.10 to 16.20, if that makes sense.
Let's see. Can you distribute to say just material for material tax and not to just a WBS?
So you can, if that was actually back, stop double clicking. So that was back here when I picked on percent of direct. If I wanted to say percent of material, I could do that. In this case, I had no material cost defined, so it instantly goes to 0. And then for the rules, though, this is basically where you want it to be distributed. So if I wanted to say this is materials for concrete, basically our material 5% escalation of material onto my concrete is how you would read this.
All right. Well, I think we're done. So, Mike, thank you very much for showing us all the features of Estimator 2.0, and thanks everyone for staying with us on this webinar.
Thank you again for your time.